Hello and welcome to Color Girl Quilts. I'm Sharon and I'm here to tell you all about the Classic Curves Plus ruler. Now, some of you who've been around here for a little while have used the Classic Curves ruler, and I have several videos featuring the Classic Curves ruler and how to use it for cutting your shapes and piecing curves to make quilts. And the brilliant thing about the Classic Curves ruler is that it cuts both the concave and the convex shape, and the pieces include seam allowance, so it makes them really easy to sew together and requires less trimming and squaring once you're finished. Just now, we are introducing the Classic Curves Plus, and it is huge. It's fantastic, and I can't wait to see what you all make with it. This one has the same kind of concept. I've made a few improvements on the design that I think you're really going to like. There is a non-slip surface on the back of the Classic Curves Plus to help it stay in place on your fabric as you cut. It also has more like graphics and illustrations to show you which shapes you're cutting and where to line your fabric up. It also has basic instructions right on the ruler, so if you forget how to cut or which pieces you're doing, you can refer right to those illustrations and instructions that are printed directly on the ruler. But guess what is amazing about this and why it's so big but not too big? It's still going to be great for your sewing space and on your cutting mat, but you can cut 19 sizes. You can cut circles with a radius from 4 inches up to 13 inches. Those are the unfinished sizes. So of course it'd be 3.5 inches up to 12.5 inches once they're sewn. And that's the radius. So that means that you can do full circles from 7 inches up to 25 inches. So imagine you can do these great big circles and make like bullseyes, or you can do half circles or little tiny ones. There's so many options. And it's not only circles, you can do orange peels and arcs and so many other things in 19 sizes. It's amazing. So I'm here today. I'm so glad that you are willing to let me into your space for a minute and show you how to use the ruler. Today, we are going to make some simple 1/4 inch blocks. These are kind of your most traditional curved piecing units in quilting, traditionally called the drunkard's path unit, but it's just a 1/4 inch. It's just a 1/4 circle, and you can do so many things and so many different designs with them. So that's what we're gonna start with. They're the most basic, simple shape to cut as well as piece, but provide so many possibilities for quilting designs. For my version and what we're going to make today, you can follow along and make yours like mine, or choose any fabric combination that you like. For mine, I'm going to make 4 block units with each combination of fabric. So I'm going to do 2 that have the color in the convex shape and the white in the concave or background shape, and 2 with the light fabric on the convex shape and the color fabric in the background shape. So we'll do 2 of each of those and out of each set of fabrics. If you're going to sew along with me and make the 4 units with the opposite colors, you'll need 2 squares of your colored fabric that are 6.5 inches. You'll also need 2 squares of your background or lighter fabric that are also 6.5 inches. So a total of 4 6.5 inch squares. And then you'll need 1 square of your light fabric that's 7.5 inch square and 1 of your colored fabric that's 7.5 inch square. So a total of 2 7.5 inch squares. Okay, so gather your materials and we will head to the cutting mat and I'll show you how to cut your pieces with the new Classic Curves Plus ruler. Let's start with a quick basic orientation of how the Classic Curves ruler works and how to read the different numbers. and knowing which groove to use to cut the fabric that you want to make. The great thing about the Classic Curves ruler is that you don't have to do math to figure out your measurements. It's super simple, and I'm going to show you how to do it. I've put the ruler on a piece of white cardboard to make it easier for you to see, because once we start using it on the cutting mat, then it's a little bit harder to see the numbers on the camera. Okay, so let's start here. You're going to need to cut, for every curved block, you'll need to cut a concave shape, which is this corner kind of L-shaped piece, so that it's the one that your curved shape is going to fit inside. Okay, and then you're also going to cut a convex shape, which is the rounded side, kind of like the piece of the pie that goes in to the concave shape. All right, so these lines on the ruler reflect where you line your fabric up to cut each shape. So if I want to cut my concave shape, which is going to be something like my background piece, like one like this, then I'm going to line my fabric up with these lines and find the measurement that I want to cut along these edges of the ruler. Okay, if I want to cut the convex shape like this, then I'm going to line the fabric up with these lines next to that shape and cut through the groove marked by the measurements along these sides. Now, what makes it super easy is that you're going to cut both of the shapes with the same cutting groove. And just like with regular straight piecing, you'll cut your pieces a 1/2 inch larger than what you want them to finish because of the seam allowance. So just like if you wanted to make a 2-inch square, you would need to cut the fabric first at 2.5 inches square. The same goes for the curved pieces. If I want to make a curve that's going to be 5 inches at the radius, then I would need to cut my pieces with the 5.5 inch groove. Okay, it'll make a lot more sense, I think, when I show you exactly how to do it with the fabric. Okay, so let's start by cutting the convex shape. That's going to be your 6.5 inch squares. You're going to place them on the cutting mat and position the ruler so that two of the sides of the square line up with the lines on the ruler for cutting the convex shape. Okay, once you have the fabric in position, follow that line out to the 6.5 inch cutting groove here and cut the fabric. Okay, that's going to give us our two convex shapes. We can set those aside for when we're ready to piece. Okay, now for the 7.5 inch squares. These are the fabrics that we're going to cut the concave shape, or this outside corner with the curve cut into it. Okay, we're going to cut two shapes from each 7.5 inch square. Your first step is to fold the square on the diagonal so that you're bringing two corners together, and then cut 1 inch from the two folded corners on both sides. Okay, now just to help you visualize where we're going with this, when you open your fabric, you'll see that now we have the square but with notches cut out of two corners. They should be 1 inch. And to help you visualize, we're going to cut the curve into the piece like this to get two of our corner shapes. So these corners that we just cut are going to end up being this little piece of your finished shape. Okay, so that's kind of like the little leg piece. So that's why we cut those pieces out. But the easiest way to do it, I found, is to keep your fabric folded and position the ruler. Now remember, we're going to be cutting our concave shape. So we want to follow the lines out to our 6.5 inch cutting groove. And see how it's lined up with that line. And then go to the other side, follow the line up, and adjust slightly until we also have that side lined up with the concave cutting lines. And our 6.5 inch groove should be about 3/4 of an inch in from the side on both sides. Okay? So let's cut through the 6.5 inch groove. And that gives us 2 of our concave shapes. And that means we are ready to start sewing. Okay, for our sewing step, we are going to need one of our convex shapes, one of our concave shapes, and some pins. Okay, now the best way to do it that I found, or the quickest and easiest, which is what we're always looking for, right, is to simply fold the fabric and pinch it to create a crease that marks the center of the curved side. And then fold both sides in and crease to do the same thing. Okay, you'll do the same thing on the other shape so that you are marking the position at the center and halfway to the center on both pieces. Okay, so super easy, just pinch the fabric and it creates a temporary mark, and that's all that we need. Now turn the fabrics right sides facing and first line up that center mark and place a pin there. Okay, and then gently put the fabric together right sides facing so that the second mark lines up. And pin, and then the same thing on the other side. You want those 2 pinched places to line up. This will help you a great deal as you're sewing because it keeps the fabric in position and doesn't allow it to slip, because as you can imagine, because we're kind of bending this curve around, the fabric will want to kind of bounce back into its natural shape. But by pinning it in place, that'll help a lot. And if you're more comfortable with more pins, you are welcome to match up these fabric edges all along the curve and put as many pins as you want or need. You'll find that when you first start out, you'll like having a lot of pins and you'll want to sew quite slowly, which is fine. Everybody does that, and it's the best way to get a really nice quilt block. As you get more experienced and you've sewn a few of these, you'll kind of start to get the feel of it. You'll be able to pick up speed and may even find that you don't need as many pins. Alrighty, we are ready to head to the sewing machine and sew our first curve to make a block unit. We're off and running. So we're going to use our piece with the concave shape on top. This is completely personal preference, and some people do it the opposite with the convex piece on top, but this is the way that I like to do it. I've had the most success like this. Okay, so make sure that those edges are lined up, put it under your presser foot, and get started. Now remove pins as you approach. You don't want to run over your pins. And as you can see, it's not a whole bunch different than sewing a straight seam. You do have to kind of work with that top piece a little bit and make sure that you're keeping it in position with the edges of both fabrics lined up with each other. and remove a pin. You can stop and pause and adjust as often as you need to. But with these nice big curves, they're actually pretty simple and go together really nicely. That's why I picked the 6-inch. It's a little on the bigger side. Great for starting out, getting used to sewing those curves. The bigger the curve, the bigger your block, the easier it will be to sew. And conversely, the smaller ones will be more difficult. So if you start getting into making patterns with like 4-inch blocks, that's going to be trickier, but it's definitely can be done and makes adorable little circles. And now I'm going to take this to my ironing board and press it toward the outer fabric, toward the concave shape or the lighter fabric on mine, and I'll have a nice flat curved seam. Okay, so let's press these and I will meet you back at the cutting mat to trim and square, making all of our blocks the same size and ready to sew together. Okay, so once you have several of your blocks sewn, the next step is to trim. And the purpose of trimming and squaring is to make sure that all of your blocks are the same size. Of course, that makes sense for sewing them together. But when it comes to the curved pieces, if you want them to meet up where the seams are, to match the seams to make complete circles or half circles, it's important to make sure that you trim so that there's the same amount of background fabric to the outside of the seam on each end of the curve. Okay, so that's going to be something we're going to pay close attention to. Just like we cut all of our pieces with the 6.5-inch groove on our classic curves ruler, we are also going to trim and square them to 6.5 inches. Okay, so let's start with this one. And what we're going to do is, first of all, find the 6.5 on your ruler. So this is my two 6.5-inch marks, so that's my 6.5-inch square. And if I follow that down and make sure that I'm kind of visualizing the square that's going to become my block size. Now, like I said before, I want to make sure that there's the same amount of fabric to the outside of the curve on both sides so that they match up when I go to sew them together. And in this case, I'm doing 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that my 6.5-inch lines are covering fabric on all four sides, and that the 3/8 of an inch mark is at the seam line on both ends. Okay, so you can see that here we've got 3/8 of an inch is at the seam, and here 3/8 of an inch is at the seam. Okay, so at that point we can go ahead and cut the first two sides and then turn the block around. And this time we've got two straight sides all ready to go. So we'll line those two sides we just cut with the 6.5-inch marks. Okay, so that we get our block to that size, and trim the last two sides. Okay, so this gives us our perfectly square 6.5-inch block, and also a piece that has the 3/8 of an inch at each, the 3/8 of an inch of fabric outside the seam at both sides. So if we do that same step for all of our fabric, so now look, my two 6.5-inch squares match up, and that curved seam is going to match up when I sew it together. So I'll have a perfect half circle, or in my case, I think I'm going to put them all four together and make full circles. Okay, so that is our technique for trimming and squaring up our blocks. You'll need to do that for all of your squares, and then it's time to lay them out and get ready to arrange and sew them together into a quilt top. Okay, I'll meet you at the design wall and we'll do that next. Okay, here we are, the moment we've been preparing for. You're going to see why the drunkard's path, or the quarter circle blocks, are the most popular and traditional curved piecing unit. As we've shown already, they are easy to cut, easy to sew, and easy to square up. You can make a lot of them pretty quickly, and you will see that you can do a lot of different patterns with them too. So I hope you've enjoyed this so far. I've loved showing you the new Classic Curves Plus ruler, and I hope that you enjoy using it and try it out and make some of your own creations as well. You'll find more patterns as well as the original Classic Curves ruler, which is a little bit smaller, which is also, you can use that to make these blocks as well. It's the right size. And patterns and more at colorgirlquilts.com. So I hope that you'll visit me there as well after this video is finished. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, to hit the like and subscribe button, and make sure that you're part of the Colorful Quilters community. Okay, let's see how these pretty blocks look. Like I said at the beginning, I made mine in sets of a color and a light background piece because I wanted to put them together in circles that alternate the colors. I just thought that this would be kind of a fun way to spice up the basic circle blocks. And so that's what those will look like if we do them like that. So, and of course, it's going to be different if you use different colors, different color combinations. So I have a couple of pink ones here. You can see what they look like. Oops. Together. So imagine this on a quilt. Like it's very simple and the pieces are big, which makes it fun. You can use some of your favorite fabrics or larger scale prints because the blocks are big. But it's very graphic and kind of has a lot of movement, which I think is fun. So that's one way of putting them together. And to do this, you'll have to make the blocks like I showed you and make 4 of each color combination. So 2 with the color in the convex shape and 2 with the light color in the convex shape. So you'll make them in groups of 4. You can make as many as you want to make the quilt that you want to make. Okay, let's try shifting it up a little bit. What if we do half circles? So for this one, you could just put them right on top of each other. Oops. And make them into half circles. You could get kind of a clamshell shape. So you could do something like this. Or, of course, you could offset them a little bit, and that way you would really get a clamshell shape. So let's see, what if we do, where are some of our ones with the light background? So you can see where if you plan the position of your pieces, that you can get shapes where the blocks come together too. So not only do our individual block pieces create a pattern, but by planning where you put the colors for both pieces and then put them next to each other can create interesting shapes too. Or of course we can do something really scrappy and just put a lot of different colors and fabrics together in the same. Here, let's do it opposites. How about if we do blue and blue and pink and pink. Okay, so you can do it like a 2-color combination like that. You can make all 4 of them different for a different look. Heck, you can I even just really like the look of them all just going the same direction. This is kind of the ultimate simplicity and just very modern. You can do, like, the more you put together, the more effect you get from the pattern. Like, that's a really, really pretty way to do them, just really simply. The advantage of doing something like this is that you don't have any seams to match. So if your blocks, you know, came out a little bit wonky, you don't have to worry too much about that because you're not making continuous arcs for half circles or circles. They can just go like that. So my plan is to piece all of my blocks like this in the complete circles with the 2 colors in each block. Thanks for joining me today, and happy sewing. See you later.